Hello again. Welcome back. This is episode 2 of The Green Room. I'm not yet sure what to title this bit, but in this episode, I think this is a chance to talk about some things that may be on some of your minds, which is sort of like, why the hell is Matt doing this? Why now? Why comedy? What's this transition like? What's it like to start over again? What are the kinds of things that transfer? So is it really starting over again? That's probably going to take a while. So I think that's the content we'll cover here this time. So let's go. Let's get started. All right. Let's start with the question of what is it like to start over again in terms of your career at the age of 37. And I know some people are watching this and going like, 37 is not that old. And like, fine, you're old people. You get to have that perspective. But at the age of 37, it sure feels like I've spent a lot of time doing other things. And changing gears in such a significant way, in a very real way, does feel like starting over. Like you're throwing away whole parts of your life, potentially to just kind of never look back. And for me, I think one of the ways in which I'll answer that question in terms of what it's like to start over, I need to frame that a bit in terms of my life. And frankly, this isn't the first time I've started over, so to speak. So a lot of people know this. Some people don't. It hasn't yet been in a stand-up bit I've written, though I guarantee you it's going to come up. I was raised Mormon, and I'm not. If you haven't sort of been able to deduce that already by the numerous, the copious amounts of swearing and talking about certain topics that maybe wouldn't be church appropriate. That's not how I identify now. That was one of the first times in life that I felt like I was starting over. There are a lot of friends and people. In fact, those of you who maybe are seeing this on Facebook, I left Facebook for a long time because the friends that I had on there were sort of friends from another life, and friends that I think if I'm being fair to you, I owe you an apology, because my assumption was that you wouldn't understand if that's you, right? That these people who knew me as a very specific person who believed in a very specific set of principles, who adhered to a religion and really quite strictly, that you would not have the capacity to be happy for me, even as I found happiness, because it wasn't your happiness. And it didn't align with the things that in your life make you happy. And it was unfair of me to assume that, but sometimes I've made poor decisions. Surprise. I hope that in reconnecting with some of you, that I know for some of you, your views on those things have changed too. In any case, this is all a really roundabout way of saying that felt like a starting over for me too. Finding new friends, new communities. It was daunting. That was maybe the first time. I've also changed careers a number of times. When I went back from Russia, so as a Mormon, I was a Mormon missionary for 2 years in Siberia. Coming back from that, I went back to BYU. I basically failed out of BYU. I left on academic warning after going to BYU on scholarship. That felt like a starting over too. I went into sales. I sold cars. And when that industry when I felt like I was done with that, I had another starting over point. I had to figure out what I was going to do. There have been a number of times where I've come to this place where I'm like, okay, I have a plan. I think I know what my life is going to be. And then at some point the plan changes and I've had to completely reevaluate, look at it again and go, all right, what's next? So this is just another one of those points for me. And I like change. Change for me has often been a catalyst for growth. And even my wife, Annie, would tell you that I'm weird about it, that I get excited about it. Even excited about moving. You know, we moved to Charleston a little over a year ago for work, and that was a huge change. We moved from Iowa to Charleston, and then after being there for a year and deciding that place sucked, we moved back to the Midwest, and that was a big change too. And we didn't go back to the place we lived before. We're now in Wisconsin, in totally different area, different surroundings. That was an adventure too. So my attitude towards starting over is maybe not as... It's like the meme of you know, the guys getting hung, which is the right, hanged. I think it's hanged, getting hanged. And the one looks to the other and says, first time. Like, it's scary. But the more you do it, the less you're afraid of it, perhaps. And I don't know what that says about me, that I've had to start over so many times that it's less scary and more exciting. But there you go. That's a little insight into this weird brain. But the next question then about what transfers, what skills transfer, and what really is new and what isn't, I think speaks to part of like that less fear of starting over is in part due to a realization that you're not completely and entirely starting over all the time. Like, I'm going to get on a tangent here, but that's kind of what this format is about. And it's this, the tangent is this, it's that starting over doesn't mean you lose everything. If you're still you, if you still have everything you are and you know who you are, you don't lose that. No one can really take that away from you. You could banish me to another planet, or another reality, maybe another, planets. There's not a lot of them that have being able to live on them is tough. But banish me into an alternate reality where I don't know anybody. Earth-like planet, whatever, same, but I have no network, I have no whatever. I still have everything in here. And that somehow makes it less terrifying, despite all the other challenges. I think that's something that we lose focus on sometimes in the face of loss. This is the tangent, really, but it's a lesson that I've learned throughout the years, and one that I think has served me well. And it's that loss is a really goofy thing, and dealing with loss is a really goofy thing. Loss is effectively, in a lot of ways, it's grief over a future that we thought we were going to have, that we now no longer have, right? Whether that's the loss of a loved one, like you thought you were going to have a future with them. You had plans and ideas and dreams and all of this in your head, these expectations and hopes, and those are all gone. Like, you're grieving the loss of that alternate future that you thought was going to be your future. Or losing a job, right, is the loss of certainly security, financial security, material security, though depending on your skill set and your willingness to reapply that's not necessarily, you're probably freaking out over not much, especially given the state of the current job market, though that can change too. But you're grieving the future that you thought you had. And when we can't move on from that, and I know there's been that's such generic terms, like moving on, when you can't deal with that, or when you can't refocus, maybe that's the way to put this. When you can't just sort of accept the situation for whatever it is and say, you know what do we do now? When you can't get back to planning and focusing on what's ahead of you, that's where we get into trouble. And it's where we really get into our crises of identity, which are like the most destructive things we can get into. So all that to say, for me, moving forward or starting over is an exercise in taking inventory and saying, where do we go from here? You can grieve the future that was lost. You can grieve the friends and communities you've been disconnected with, all the people that you loved, but who now maybe don't or won't be able to identify with or understand you well or share in your joy, or all, like, whatever the situation is, however you were starting over, you're allowed to grieve that. But what are you going to do? And I've had to go through that exercise a number of times. So now to skills, like what transfers. That was heavy. I'm not going to apologize for it. I hope in some way you found that enlightening or insightful, or maybe it'll help you in your whatever your situation is. But let's change gears now. Talk about skills. Skills and things that transfer. So skills and things that transfer. There's a lot of things that transfer from my previous careers and jobs and things to now. And this is the point at which it maybe would help to give an accounting or an inventory of all the different things that I've done in a sort of professional capacity over the 23 years that I have been in the workforce. So do the math, I'm 37. I just said I've been in the workforce for 23 years, 24 technically, but like I started working the summer of my 14th birthday. So I was 13 technically. It was illegal. I was being paid under the table, but I was close enough, and it was like a friend's dad's business. But that's how long I've been working, with really very few gaps, no real significant ones. And I've done a lot in that time. I'm not going to say I've accomplished a lot, but I've done a lot. I had to write out this list. I have to write it out every time because there's so many jobs, companies I've worked for, positions that I've had, that I honestly have to write it out to keep it all straight. I'm going to pull up the note here, and I'll try and make this brief. Hopefully you'll find this interesting, but so I started working at a Mako paint shop. It was my very first job. It's a car paint shop. And my first job as a 13, almost 14-year-old was literally sanding and prepping cars for painting and then detailing them afterwards. Probably not everybody's first job. My second job was working at Butler's Orchard. This was in Maryland, where I grew up. And this is a small farm. They're the kind of place that does everything, right? They grow fruit, they grow vegetables, they grow Christmas trees. The whole community can show up, and they have a little store, and I worked in the store. After that, I was a server at Bob Evans. This was in high school now. After that, I was an intern, a student intern at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So that is in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I worked with in the mechanical engineering labs in, I forget exactly what they called it, but it was effectively a robotics division. So I did machining, prototyping, like that kind of stuff at the level you would expect of a high schooler. So, it's not like I was doing really incredible stuff, but that was pretty cool, and I did that for a while as an intern. I was a missionary for the Mormon Church for 2 years. I was in Siberia, so that was where I learned Russian. And, of course, got a bunch of sales experience, and which Mormons will bristle at maybe categorizing it as sales experience, but that's effectively what it was. There's a whole tangent we could go into there. We won't. When I came back from Russia, I had a couple of months gap before going back to school. I worked in a Great Harvest bread store making bread. While I was back at BYU, I then worked in the mechanical engineering lab, helping students with projects. So graduate students would come in with their capstone project working on the F1 racer, and they'd need to make some part, and they'd be like, how do I do this? Or how do I use this machine? And I'd help set them up on, using the lathe or the mill, or it was like feeds and speeds type education and that sort of thing. That was fun. I also worked as an auto technician at that time. So I got a job working with a garage in town in Provo, Utah, working on cars. And after that, I went back to being a waiter at an Italian restaurant there in Provo that no longer exists. Much like, much like the car shop, like the auto shop that I worked for, no longer exists. Much like many of these, which maybe don't read into that too much. That the common thread is me and them going out of business. Let's see. After that place, I dropped out of school and I sold cars. And I sold first for Mazda, then I sold for Lexus. That was for about a year between those two. After that, I went back to school, and while going back to school, I was working. I did customer service for a what'd you call that? I guess a credit card processor. After that, I did went back to being a server again at another Italian restaurant, and was head waiter, and eventually, right before they went out of business, I was assistant manager there for a short time. I worked at a LAN gaming center, like a gaming cafe, for a while going to school. I also had a job doing remote dispatching for a cab company. So I was going to school in Utah and dispatching cabs for a company in Alexandria, Virginia. And then after I graduated, I worked for Mozy, which was a software company, online backup, and they're now EMC Dell. They've been acquired. And then I worked for them for a few years, and then my last gig was at Workiva, which is a software as a service global SaaS company. They're in, like, go watch some of my conference talks. I'll tell you what they do. I don't really want to rehash it here. But so the totals there was, in 23 years, 17 companies, and between the 17 companies, 27 different roles and titles. So like when we have this conversation sometimes, like I'll be at a, like having drinks with someone or a few people, and we'll talk about all the jobs that people have had in their lives. And I have yet to find somebody my age that's had more jobs than I have. And this, given that, like, my last two, spanned over 10 years. So, I mean, most of them were before that, like while going to school and before going to school. And I often had more than one job at the same time. So skills that transfer. Sales experience is probably the biggest one. And if you don't have sales experience, I don't fault you for thinking, for having rude thoughts about that. Like, hell no, I would never want to be in sales. I certainly don't blame you for that. But I would say that that's one of the things that, not just for comedy, but in general, that skill set has probably taught me more and given me more experiences that have followed me and prepared me in ways for all of the different things that I've done than anything else. One of the ways in which that was important is that it taught me how to deal with rejection. Like in sales or as a missionary or whatever, like people are going to say no all the time, no matter what you're trying to sell. Generally speaking, it's no, 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 because we're all getting bombarded every day to buy things. That's like, this is the age of consumerism, right? That's not a new idea. That's not the first time you've heard that. And everybody is trying to sell you something. I mean, even I want you to buy this, I don't know, the whole like and subscribe and share with others. Like, I'm trying to build an audience. So in a way, yeah, I'm trying to sell you something too. I want your eyeballs. I want your attention, right? This is the attention economy, which also says something about my insecurities and what I need as a person, but we can travel down that tangent later. It taught me how to deal with rejection. It taught me how to work a pitch, refine a pitch, and just talk to people over and over and over and talk to strangers. I'm actually naturally, you won't believe this, but my natural inclination is to be very introverted. And I sort of joke that I'm like a housebroken introvert. Like I have the capacity to talk to people. I actually enjoy conversations. I enjoy talking about very interesting topics. But that's not like social situations, especially going to like big parties where I don't really know anyone. Like that is not my jam. In fact, even going to like some of these open mics and stuff, like I can't wait to get on stage and be in front of people and have that connection with the audience. And then I get off the stage and I am awkward as fuck again. It's just who I am. But learning to talk to people, learning how to gauge people's reactions and how to read a room and read people, those are all things that came out of sales. Not that I'm perfect at any of these things, right? Like I'm not saying like, oh, I'm the best at all of this. I'm not. But whatever skill I have in it, I owe a lot of that to sales. So yeah, sales is a huge part of it. Communication as a skill set, I would say, and communication is something, there's a whole tangent we could go off on here because I believe that communication in general is just applied human psychology. It's the ability to understand people and work with them. If it doesn't feel like I've connected those ideas for you well, then I'm not communicating right now, and that's fair. This is all sort of off the cuff. This is not a prepared communication, as you can probably tell by my meandering style. But knowing how to communicate with different audiences, knowing how to tailor your message for them, trying to understand what people want and how they might be getting that through your communication, all of that. These are skills that I've worked on through all of my careers, and they continue to be useful now. Writing is a huge one. So if you don't write, do it. And there are few things that I will take that strongest stance on. If you do not write regularly, even to yourself, this could be in a diary, it could be whatever, blog. If you do not write, you should. Similarly, if you do not read, and you can read books, nonfiction books by people that have more interesting things to say than I do. You can read fiction books. That's primarily me. I read for fun. But reading and becoming familiar with the written word and improving your lexicon through that is an exercise that always pays dividends. Writing is something that has often set me apart in my professional field. The last company that I worked for, I was there 7.5 years. I was promoted 5 times. I wore 6 different hats at that company. And a large part of that often, I believe, came down to there were times when I was able to effectively communicate, whether that was an email, whether it was a presentation, whether it was, some other written artifact or oral artifact, presentation that starts as a written artifact. The ability to structure your thoughts, to create cogent arguments, and bring people from point A to B. If you're not writing, you're completely missing an entire tool set that makes not only the exercise of that skill set, the development of it, but the efficacy, like you're completely blunting both of those things. Get practiced with writing. That skill set has transferred. And as I write material, that is, at least so far, how I do it. I literally write it out. And then there's a lot of iteration on that, but writing is important. Other skill sets that transferred. Let's see here. What else did I have on the list? Public speaking, obviously. That's I probably should have put that one first. Public speaking, yes. I gave a fair number of conference talks. In fact, I sought out those opportunities to get in front of people and give conference talks. If you are somebody that hates public speaking, I can't help you there. I have the gene that, for whatever reason, I enjoy it. I can't give you that, but I love it. In fact, I would say that is getting to another question, sort of like why now, why comedy? The why comedy bit, a lot of it has to do with that connection that you make with people on a stage. If you've never had this experience, I'm sorry. I will do my best to explain it to you. One of the first times that I gave a conference talk, and I think it was in San Francisco, was maybe the first time I gave a big conference talk. I'd traveled from Iowa, and I gave a conference talk on like basically removing. This is going to get technical. You don't want to hear it. It was a technical topic, but I had to prepare 30 or 40 minutes and keep people entertained and engaged during that time while talking about a fairly technical subject. There is something about being locked in with an audience. And by locked in, I mean there's a point at which on the stage there's almost like a resonance energy. Like I'm not big into metaphysical bullshit. Like that's not me. But I don't know how else to explain this other than when you have 500 pairs of eyes locked on you, following your every word, in some ways almost surrendering a part of their consciousness to be guided by you. That is like, I don't know how else to explain that other than it's one of the most fucking amazing feelings in the world. And I was hooked as soon as I felt that the first time. And it takes preparation, like to actually hold an audience's attention. It takes preparation, it takes skill, it takes confidence. It takes many of those things that I got in sales. In addition to just having something that's actually worth hearing. There's a lot of things that have to be right for that. But when it happens, it is, like spiritual in a sense. It's weird to say that, but that's why. It's why I love it. And it's why I love public speaking. And I don't get that in this interaction, right? I'm just staring at a camera. But I hope, my hope is that I'll have that experience again through doing this. Being able to get on stage, as I've done a few times already, but with longer format content. That sort of gets into a whole other tangent. We can talk another time about actually getting started in this and like some of the challenges. All right. Confidence is probably the other thing that transfers. One of the things about doing sales is if you can handle the rejection, you can handle the rejection in part because you have to develop a confidence in yourself that all of that rejection, you can't let that stick to you. You have to, in some ways, say, that's not me, that's the product, it's the whatever, while taking a certain amount of like, it is me in terms of it's my approach or it's things that I can improve upon. But you cannot let rejection stick to your soul in a way, I guess would be the way to put it. So you develop a certain amount of confidence. Confidence is the life hack. Like if there's if there's anything that describes like just if you want to succeed in life, just be confident. Like in practice, it's much more complex, the application of that principle. But in theory, that's it. Like that's the thing. That's the life hack. Project confidence wherever you go. And there's an understanding, too, of it's a numbers game. Everything's a numbers game. Sales is a numbers game. Getting a job is a numbers game. In the sense that if you have enough data points, let's go here. As a missionary, if I talked to enough people, some percentage of them would be interested in, like, if you have a first contact with someone, like, hey, on a bus, or hello on a street, or whatever, right? A certain percentage of those will convert into people that are willing to talk to you for a longer period of time. A certain percentage of those people will talk to you even longer. A certain percentage of those people will eventually buy whatever you're selling. It's all a numbers game. And it's all about getting exposure. It's the same thing if you're looking for a job. There are some number of jobs and companies out there that are perfect for you. If you only apply to 2 places, you're probably not going to find them. If you throw out a bajillion resumes and have a bajillion interviews, yeah, like if you could interview with all of them, you'd find them. It's a numbers game. That's a whole complex thing too. But like this comedy, my comedy, is not going to resonate with everybody. That's fine. If I get in front of enough of them, it'll resonate with enough of them that I'll probably find my audience. It's a numbers game. So that attitude, both the understanding that confidence is kind of paramount and the idea that your success in some ways is just about putting yourself out there, that transfers. All right, that's enough on that. We've already talked a bunch. So good on you for sticking with me if you're still here. I want to talk about why comedy and why now, and then we'll wrap it up. So why comedy, why now? Let's talk about the why now bit first. So my last job was as director of engineering for a global SaaS company building new products specifically. Software is cool. Software is lucrative. That was a very that was a nice profession. So why would you leave that, Matt? I've had to do a lot of soul searching in the time since I left it. And I will say broadly that leaving it was not my choice in this instance. But the question then of, would I go back? Would I go work with another company in software? Would I just take this skill set that I have that I can prove on my resume? Like that's the easiest thing for me to do, is to just go out and get another tech job working as some tech leader in another company. I have to be very careful about how I speak about this from a legal liability perspective. Cards on the table. So as I speak about this, I'm going to try to speak about it in generalities. Because the truth is, the company that I left was and is still a good place. And there are lots of amazing people that I know that work there, whom I respect deeply and whose association I cherish. My time spent in technology, and particularly in leadership, especially as I got into sort of the upper echelons of leadership, they weren't always positive. That won't surprise you. And, you know, I once had a conversation with a previous mentor of mine. At the time, I had aspirations of like becoming a C-level executive, or, you know, if you'd been like, Matt, where do you want to be in 10 years? I'd be like, running this damn company. I was very naive, but spirited. And maybe that's another common thread through my life. Maybe it's a thing I'm working through right now, getting into comedy. But I asked him about that because he was not a C-level executive. And I asked him, an older gentleman, how he felt about that and the point that he was at in his career, if that was what he wanted and why he hadn't gone there. And I'll never forget his response, because his response, he basically said that being in that level of senior leadership, especially in a larger company, it's a lot like going on a road trip. And especially if you're an outsider, it's like going on a road trip with a bunch of people who they're all really good friends, have known each other for a long time, and you're maybe the new guy that's joining the group. And he said, what you learn is when you get in the car, there's a lot of dysfunction in that car. That their relationships, their personalities, they have conflicts, there's nothing about being in a senior leadership position of a company anywhere. Again, this isn't me taking any shots at my last employer specifically. I think that there are a lot of people listening to this who have experience in this who would say amen. People are still people, And nothing about being a senior leader at any level in any company makes you a better person. In fact, I believe that there are significant market forces and pressures in this fucked up corporate society that we have, the corporate states of America. There's a lot about that that's hardwired towards pressuring you to being a worse person, depending on how you phrase that, better or worse, right? These are sort of moral judgments in a sense. But his response effectively was like, you don't want to be in that car. There's a certain level at which you kind of go like, okay, to climb further up the corporate ladder, you need to be willing to accept a certain amount of dysfunction, sell a certain part of your soul, or however you want to phrase that. Now, I know that there are companies out there with fantastic executives. I know that there are companies out there who are led by really wonderful people who genuinely care about other people and not just about the bottom line and all of that. But as a generality, as a generalization, my experiences, again, not just with my last company, but in general in tech and also in speaking with a lot of other leaders of other companies, has, like, that advice given to me by that mentor rings pretty true. I'll tell you another story. I have a pretty close friend, and I won't say his name out of respect for him. And he is also in senior leadership at a company. This is a friend who, back in college, we would sit around in the evenings, like many a night were spent around a table in a diner with a couple of long, cold, discarded remnants of food, just thinking of ways to take over the world. And I don't mean literally take over the world, but like startup ideas, product ideas. We were just constantly like, our jam was just to sit down and think up ways to make money. And of course, we were broke college students that could barely afford pancakes at a diner. So, you know, we had no chance of really making it a reality, but it was fun. And it was a neat exercise, if nothing else, to just sit around and be Pinky in the Brain, which is kind of what we joked we always were. And I was Pinky, of course. That friend is now in charge of and has been involved at very high levels with different companies. And the last time I spoke with him, and I'll say this has been the last few times I've spoken with him, and I love him and cherish our relationship and our association. But that friend, I miss that friend. I miss that friend of 20 years ago or 15 years ago, sitting around a diner full of optimism and enthusiasm, because those things don't. He's not optimistic. He's not enthusiastic. He's burnt out. He's jaded. He is, and maybe in some ways depressed. I don't know. If he is, I love him and want to help him. But some part of participating at that level in corporate America has broken him in ways that I can't fix. And to me, that's kind of a tragedy. So when it comes to this decision that I had of asking, like, do I want to go back? Do I want to follow that career again? There are a couple of things that have informed my decision there. Those experiences among them. That whole saying of, like, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. In some ways, I think that's true of corporate leadership today. Maybe I was already starting down my path to villainy, but this was a chance to wake up and say, is that really what I want to do? And I think after a bit of reflection, my answer was no. So that's why now. And there's a desire to do something where I can be mine, where I'm not owned by anyone. I'm not having to drink the Kool-Aid. I was always bad at that. Surprise. I always rebelled against the Kool-Aid. That's whatever the corporate culture is, or whatever we always said our corporate culture was. I was always raising an eyebrow at that and going like, but I know where the bodies are buried. Like, I know what you motherfuckers actually do. And to not be used in a way that makes overpaid executives more money, or that makes shareholders, who statistically are already the rich people, not the, the 3% of shareholders that the rest of us make up, that makes them more money. Like, I'm not enthusiastic about that. So if I could find a way to be my own boss, to work for me, and to be mine, to be owned by myself in a way, it's a big part of my motivation for choosing to do this. And why comedy is, I love to write, I love public speaking and performing, and I am a junkie for that feeling of connecting with an audience. Not just over laughs, but even on serious topics like this. I miss that. I crave that. Whether that's because of the feelings of approval, or, you can break that down and psychoanalyze it however you like. It's probably all valid. We're all broken, and I'm broken in ways too. But that's why comedy, and why now, and how does it feel to start over? What skills transfer? I've talked your ear off for way longer than anyone should be allowed. So again, if you've stuck with me, thank you. And I appreciate you listening. Camera that I'm speaking to. Maybe in some ways these are like therapy sessions for me. Hope they're interesting for you too. So, all right. Thanks again. Cheers.